you. So I've been married a little over 35 years to my amazing wife, and she has no idea what I'm going to say, which always brings fear to her, and it should. So been married a little over 35 years to my amazing wife, and mostly thanks to her incredible patience, faithfulness, and a whole lot of forgiveness sprinkled along the way. And you'll know why as I tell this story. So in our first year of marriage, I would sit across from the couch from her once in a while, and I would look at her with this deadpan look. Honey, you don't really know me. I'm trying to be ornery and funny, and she's like, that's not funny. That's mean and scary. Because she didn't really know me yet. But, it takes quite a while, even in a marriage, to really get to know one another. That first year, but after 35 years, she knows me. Getting to know one another, building that relationship, it takes time. It's a process. And how much more so with the most important relationship we could ever have with Jesus. It takes time, energy, effort. It doesn't just happen. And today we're going to take a look at, and you can turn there to Luke chapter 9. I'll read that in a minute. But the title of today's message is, Who Do You Say I Am? And Jesus is wanting his disciples to truly understand who he really is. And I want to give you, before we dive into that, a big picture. Step back and look at the kind of the keys to Luke. If you'll show that next slide. There are two key pillars that Luke wants us to understand as it's early on in Luke chapter 1. He says, I'm going to write this orderly account, Theophilus, his friend, so that you can know. And there's two key pillars of the book of Luke. One is the identity of Jesus. Who really is Jesus? And that's basically chapter 1 through basically where we are today. And then the second half, from the latter part of chapter 9 through the end of Luke, is this second pillar. It's the call of discipleship. The first is this revelation of who is Jesus, and then it's the response of how to respond to that revelation of who Jesus is. Those are the two key ideas that Luke wants us to understand. But in between those two pillars is this hinge. It's where Luke turns. And it's this crucial conversation that Jesus has with his disciples. And that's what we're going to dive in today. This key conversation that really turns things. So I say that because I want us to understand the gravity and the importance of what we're going to look at today. It's that crucial conversation. So let's read Luke 9:18 through 20. Next slide. It says, once when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, who do the crowd say I am? They replied, well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life. But what about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? And Peter answered, God's Messiah. This is the first part of that crucial conversation. Because if you read the next verse, which we're not going today, Jesus continues that conversation. So this conversation starts here, and it's going to, for us, end next week as we look at it. But this is the first part of this very important conversation. And I don't want us to miss this part. It says, once when Jesus was praying. That's how he introduces what's about to happen, this crucial conversation. It's once when Jesus was praying. It's almost so easy to overlook. Okay, he was praying. And then what happened? For Luke, as we've seen throughout his gospel, prayer is not like a filler, just to take us from one point to the next. If we look at Jesus' life, let me remind you of a few things. In chapter 3, verse 21, when Jesus was being baptized, it says that as he was praying, heaven opened up. As Jesus was praying, heaven opened up, and the Spirit came on him like a dove, and he heard God's voice. I am pleased with you. This is my son. Monumental time. But it was as Jesus was praying. This happened. Right before Jesus, a little bit later in chapter 6, verse 12, when he was going to choose the 12 apostles, is that a slightly important choice? World-changing, life-changing decision. So he goes, the Bible says, he went up on the mountain and he spent the night praying to God. By the way, our little prayer night, it's biblical. May feel crazy. Not everyone has to join. My house won't fit 80. But Jesus spent the night praying to God. And he made his decision. Key. Then, right after this crucial conversation, we'll get to it in 2 weeks, Jesus goes up on the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and he was transfigured. He went up there to pray, went up onto a mountain to pray, and there he was glorified. He was transfigured. Basically, God was saying, yes, this is my son. Listen to him. But Jesus was praying. And then he was transfigured. Later in Luke chapter 22, where Jesus is going to make his decision, final decision, says that he went to Gethsemane. He withdrew a little bit from his closest disciples, and he knelt down and he prayed. Probably at least 3 hours, because he kept coming back to his disciples. When Jesus prayed, turning points, monumental. So when Luke says, once when Jesus was praying, we need to take that for what it is. It wasn't just he happened to pray. Jesus was all about praying and being in communion with his Father. It wasn't like sometimes when I was a kid, it was like, all right, who wants to say the prayer? Which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? Teach your kids to pray. But it was like, who wants to say the prayer? Jesus wasn't saying the prayer that day. He was communing with God, drawing near to him, hearing from God, being led by God. So Luke doesn't haphazardly mention prayer. It's where life change happened. If even the sinless Son of God put that much focus, heart, time, energy, life, love into prayer, what does that say for me? I should pray a lot and heartfelt and pour it out. If Jesus prayed like that, how much more so you and I? Jesus got some vital insights and convictions that one day when Jesus was praying in private. Because when he came out of that private time in prayer, he asked the most important question he could ask. Then he ended up telling them who he really was. We'll look at that next week, but what the Messiah really is. And then he called them to follow. His prayer gave him focus. He came up out of that prayer, and the first thing he did is like, I've got to find out what my own disciples really think of me. What do they see? But that came from his prayer time. He got focused in prayer, came out of it, and said, I know exactly what I need to do. Guys, come here. And he asked, what were the crowd saying? But really what he wanted to know, and we'll get there, is what do you say? Guys, when we pray, it brings us focus on what's really important. Anyone get distracted with shiny things and things that must get done, and it pulls you away from what we really should focus on, what lasts? Jesus focused on his disciples rather than the crowds because he came out of communion with God. It also gave him discernment. Because when he came up out of that prayer, he realized it's time for me to tell these guys who I really am. It gave him discernment about what should come next. What should I do? How should I lead them? What would be the next step? Do you ever want help in making decisions? Like, all right, my son or my daughter, I want to help them, and we seem to be distancing. They're going through that time or challenge. How can I connect? How about prayer? Or, man, a situation with my boss at work, and is this the right time to ask for a raise, or should I wait? Is this the right time? Discernment. Pray. Seek God's input. That's what Jesus did, and it made clear what his next steps should be. How about I've got a conflict in a relationship. Maybe it's with a family member. Maybe it's a brother or sister, and you're not sure what the next step is. Discernment. And Jesus came up out of that prayer time with conviction on his purpose. Because right after this, he tells them what his mission was. He was the Messiah and where he was going. It gave him a sense of clarity of purpose. Our prayer, our time with God, it helps solidify what our purpose is. And are you convinced what your bottom line purpose is? Why am I here on this earth? Why am I alive? What is the bottom line for me? What am I living for? What really matters? Jesus finished that time and he was convinced, because it was from this point forward, he said, in about 30 verses later, it says, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. For surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. I know where I'm going. My purpose is crystal clear. Is your purpose crystal clear? You know why you wake up in the morning, and it's worth living for. That purpose. Worth dying for. Is it? Is your purpose worth that? If you're clear, it will be. And then Jesus also gained courage. Because as we'll see next week, what he did next is he basically looked at his disciples and said, you need to come and follow me and die with me. You're going to have to die to self and follow me. I'm on my way to the cross, and you must follow me. If you're going to be my disciple, this is what it looks like. Do you think that took courage for Jesus, or was everything just easy for him? To look in the eyes of the guys they loved and say, it will cost you everything to follow me. That takes courage. Because there was no guarantee they would respond to that call. But when Jesus communed with God in prayer, it brought focus. It brought discernment. It brought purpose and courage. It was transformative for him. And if Jesus needed that, what about us? What kind of insights and conviction are coming from your time with God? What do you walk away with? Lately, here's a few thoughts that have come from some time in prayer. One of the reasons why we're preaching through the Gospel of Luke, prayer. We were praying, and it's like, this is where God is leading us. We need to walk through the Gospel of Luke. That came from prayer. The prayer warriors team, who, unbeknownst to you and I, are constantly laying your name and your needs and the church before God, day in and day out. This prayer warriors team are devoted prayer warriors. That idea, that thought, came from prayer. We need that. Mike Harris teaching in our midweeks on the community of God, which I'm excited for him to share his expertise and passion. That idea came from prayer. How about Mike? That'd be fantastic for us. The career mentoring group that Jenkins is pulling off the ground, getting together. For some of you who have asked, I could use some help in my career. That came from prayer. Our 2026 focus, which will be built on prayer. Built on prayer, that came from prayer. What many of you are doing at 1:15 p.m., or Jeannie sometimes at 1:15 a.m., devil's in the details. At 1:15 p.m., many of us are taking 10 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, praying, God, help us, the Knoxville Church, by 12/31/2026 to become a group of believers numbering about 120 praying disciples. That came, that's Acts 1:15, that's why it's 1:15. That came from prayer, that we would be unified. This book that many of us are reading, it is not the Bible. This is the Bible. This is not, it's not written by the Holy Spirit. That's my caveat. But man, it has been helpful. Anybody find it helpful? Inspiring? That idea of reading it as a family came from prayer. I'm going to read just a statement from yesterday's segment, day 20. It says, don't wait for more revelation. Be obedient to the amount of revelation God has given you. Don't wait for more revelation. Be obedient to the amount of revelation God has given to you. And in the margins, I had written this, because this is my third time reading it in 90 days, which I recommend. It's actually good stuff. In the margin, it says, going back into the full-time ministry. Don't wait for more revelation. Be obedient to the amount of revelation God has given you. That happened for me a year ago. No more revelation, just do it. Prayer can change us. Are you devoted to prayer? What has God been revealing to you in your prayer times? Are you walking away with some insights, ideas, convictions, courage? I hope so, and I believe so. If not, if there's no revelation, no insights, maybe there's not enough prayer. If we get anything as Knoxville Church, we have to get prayer. We have to get prayer. And I'll say it again in the worst English possible. My prayer is that we become the most prayingest people we've ever been. The most prayingest individuals and the most prayingest group, church we've ever been. Jesus was praying, and what came out of that prayer changed everything. Out of that prayer came this question. Who do the crowds say that I am? Who do the crowds say that I am? Why do you think he asked that? Was Jesus like insecure? Hey, what are the people saying about me? I don't think he was insecure. Did he need affirmation? Like, I need somebody to affirm who I am. No. He wasn't really seeking information per se, but what he was about to do is bring revelation to the disciples through this question. He wanted the disciples to feel the difference between what the crowds were saying and what he knew he was going to ask them what they believed. He wanted them to feel the difference between this admiration and true understanding. So the crowd's answer was, well, some say John the Baptist and some Elijah and maybe one of the prophets from a long time ago. And that's an honorable answer, but woefully inadequate. If someone thought I was like John the Baptist, one, I'd like, well, at least I can grow a beard, but not really. But if someone thought, man, you're like John the Baptist or Elijah, man, what an amazing compliment that would be. But not for Jesus. That was woefully inadequate. But that's what they thought. They had seen his miracles, they'd eaten his bread, they'd heard his teachings, and still they didn't know him. You know, today, it's possible for you and I to have a really, really high opinion of Jesus and yet not know him. It happens. It happened in Jesus' day. They thought very highly of Jesus, but they still didn't recognize who he truly was. Can you show the next slide? It's possible. That picture on the left, about 2000, that's my beautiful wife and my two kids. And then down below, that's Lake Loudon, right behind our house. A few years later, and my wife, I knew her at that time, but my kids were really young. Now they're not as young, 31 and 28. A lot of life happened between 2000 and 23. And my kids went through some really difficult times, which means we went through some really difficult times. And what I learned about my wife from 2000 to 2023 is what an amazing mother she is. She's an amazing mother. She stayed in there. She helped our kids. And I didn't know in 2000 that I had that. I didn't really know. But 20 years later, I know. Sometimes you can think very highly of someone and not really understand who they are yet. Many today admire Jesus as a great teacher, maybe a great life coach, like come to Jesus and self-actualize. You can be the best you were meant to be. Or maybe an amazing social worker or a bringer of justice. If that's the case, then Jesus would improve our lives, make us better husbands, better workers, better citizens, but that would be it. That'd be it. Because of a low view of Jesus, that would be the extent of the impact. We're kind people, which is a good thing. We open doors. We say please. We say thank you. We pay our taxes. We treat people well. We become a better parent, a better spouse. And we're that coworker that can be relied on, who shows up, who has integrity. But if Jesus is just a great moral teacher, if he's just the miracle worker of that day, that's the extent. A low view of Jesus lessens his impact on us. And Jesus wants us to understand who he is. Knowing Jesus begins especially in time in God's Word and in prayer. I, maybe a little bit like Jude actually, felt like we were same background. I grew up going to church in my mom's womb. So I went for 9 months. No, it wasn't. I was born a little premature. Anyway, maybe 7.5 months. Went to church in my mom's womb, and then Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, all my life. Grade school, junior high, high school, college, went off, and I still went to church 3 times a week. But it wasn't until I got with a guy named Mark Mann, Keith Shear, and Randy Walters. We sat down and studied the scriptures more practically for me, that my life radically changed. Knowing Jesus for who he really is, not the guy that you put on the felt board in Sunday school. My life changed. I needed that Bible study, that practicality. Some of you here today, what you need is to get into the scriptures with a friend. You need to say, would you study the Bible with me? Show me who you've seen Jesus to truly be. And some of us, we need to dive in and see Jesus as he truly is. Life changes. Then when the disciples had replied who the crowds said he was, then Jesus turned and it says that he asked them, but what about you? Who do you say I am? And the Greek, the way it's written there, the emphasis is on you. It's like he's saying, but what about you? Who do you say I am? Because that's what really mattered to Jesus. The ones he was training and impacting. What do you think? And he wanted them, again, to feel a difference between admiration, what the crowds felt, and what he hoped that they believed. And Peter spoke up, right? You are God's Messiah. You're God's Messiah. And Matthew says that was revealed not by man, but by God. It's like this was from God, this understanding. And that's a much different response than you're a great prophet. You're the Messiah, the chosen, as Chris reminded us. But even here, they didn't fully understand. Even when Peter said, you're the Messiah. And we'll look at that next week. He explained it more deeply, but it was more than what Peter thought. They thought this conquering Messiah, and Jesus was going to tell them it was a suffering Messiah. They too needed a deeper understanding of Jesus. Even the disciples, you and I, maybe we still need a deeper understanding of who this Jesus is. Shouldn't we continue to be growing in our understanding? I've shared that it was about 3 years ago, and I'm 60, so yes, this happened probably when I was 57. Taking a prayer walk at my favorite place here in Lenore City, taken many times, and got to a certain place on this little hill around this place. And right there it hit me. God, you're my best friend. You really are. You're my best friend. I now come to you first. I'm a pretty much a people person. So when things happen in my life, I just go to someone. I just want to talk. Of course, my wife, or a brother, But that would be my first response. I might pray, but I really needed to talk to someone. And now, what I really need first, talk to my best friend. But then I'm reading the other day in Psalm 73, Asaph says this. He said, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire except you." I was thinking about that. Heaven has nothing except you. Okay, I got that. And earth has nothing I desire except you. I say that with 100% confidence. Earth has nothing I desire but you. I don't know if I'm there yet. I still tend to want some comfort. I want appreciation, or I want a bigger 401k, right? I still need to grow. The disciples said he's the Messiah. Still needed to grow. And next week we're going to look at where Jesus redefines for them who he really is. He's going to redefine what it means to be the Messiah. And then he will redefine what it means to be a true follower of Jesus. It's kind of upside down, but that's the way. I want to close with this. Many of us today, we admire Jesus, and that's a great start. Build on that. But sometimes we miss him as Lord and suffering Messiah. Jesus still asks, "Who do you say I am?" The crowds. Who do you say I am? And the answer to that question defines your life. Absolutely defines your life. Either you'll be religious because Jesus is a great teacher, amazing miracle worker, great social worker, bringer of justice, and you'll have a good family. And you'll imitate Jesus. But it won't impact you forever. The answer to that question will define and is defining your life right now. I want us to take 2 minutes of reflection and prayer right where we are. I'm going to ask, we can turn the lights down for just 2 minutes. And I want you to ask these two questions. Do I, as Jesus did, do I seek focus, clarity, courage in prayer? Or just wealth, health, and happiness? Do I seek focus, clarity, courage in prayer? Will I? And who is Jesus to me? And then pray in gratitude that he continues to pursue you and reveal himself to you. How good is God that he keeps pursuing our hearts. We're going to take 2 minutes, and then Kyle and Hallie will respond and close us out. Take a couple minutes to just sit where you are, close your eyes if you'd like, think and pray.